and welcome to installment number 5 of the Lowdown through JoeLauzon.com. And I feel the immediacy in my veins. We're coming to you live and direct moments after the conclusion of UFC 181 in Las Vegas. Robbie Lawler becomes the new UFC welterweight champion, defeating Johny Hendricks by split decision, and Gilbert Melendez falls to Anthony Pettis in shocking fashion via second-round guillotine as Showtime retains the championship. I'm Jack Canarcio. You know the man on the other side, UFC lightweight battler, performance bonus record holder, Joe Lauzon. And Joe, we were just chatting briefly and kind of biting our tongues before we started rolling, because there's so much to say on a fight night like this. Had to be the best fight card of the year. And let's get right to, I think, what the meatiest part of the discussion probably is. At least it feels like it at the moment. Hendricks edging Lawler, okay? First of all, how did you have the fight? How did you have it scored? Who should have gotten their hand raised?
So this is one of those fights where, you know, I tweeted out before they read off the result, like, what I thought. And I thought I was going to get tons of hate about it. And some people were telling me, oh, you're so wrong. It's the other way. But I thought that Hendricks had 2 and 3, and I thought that Robbie had 1, 4, and 5.
So you gave Lawler 4 because he was elbowing him in the body there with his head between his legs.
Absolutely. You know, I don't think that I don't give people credit for pushing someone to the fence and then not doing anything with it. Now, if Hendricks was taking him down and he was doing something with it, then yeah, okay, then a takedown is worth something. You know, you take him down, you put him in a place where you have the advantage, you do some kind of damage, you're winning because of that. When you just push him into the fence and you do nothing with it, that's not deserving of credit. That's just, you know, you push him into a fence, that's a stalemate.
That's not deserving of credit, but is it deserving of credit for Lawler just to elbow the ribs a few times?
Well, you got to think that not only do that, but Lawler is also, he's defending the takedown. So Johny is trying to put him on the ground. Robbie is keeping the feet standing where they are. So Johny is trying to accomplish something, and he's like halfway succeeding, but Robbie is also doing something. So, yeah. You know.
But I thought defense wasn't supposed to count, in as much as it only leads to offense.
I do think that it is more about offense, but you know, you can't go and say, oh, Johny pushed him in the fence. You know, and I mean, it's a perfectly fine tactic to let someone push you in the fence and then defend there. Like, some people love to defend on the fence.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. We've seen this style work for a lot of fighters and a lot of judges in the past, and sometimes it just doesn't. I suppose it's a risk you take. We ought to go through the fight sort of, you know, round by round, frame by frame, to get a better understanding of how we ended up at the point we did. But I have to ask you, Joe, about the closing sequence, because, again, Johny Hendricks sort of gratuitously went to that well again in the 5th round. Went a little too hard to the conservative side, went a little too hard to trying to protect his lead, as they would say in football. And just held that single leg and tucked his head and just hoped that the worst didn't strike. I don't know if he was tired, I'm not sure, but Lawler did, it struck me, in the closing seconds of that fight, what every Tom, Dick, and Harry sitting home watching a UFC thinks when another guy's fighting safe. Just start punching, going absolutely apeshit on the guy. Easier said than done, but I think what we saw in Robbie Lawler there is what a lot of people want to see when it's, you know, when it's in that kind of a point in a fight.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's one of those things where, you know, it's always easier said than done. You know, everyone's screaming at the television. You know, they want Robbie to start going crazy. They're like, oh, you gotta, you know, I got a text from one of my friends who said, you know, too little, too late, asshole. You know what I mean? Like, to Robbie, because, you know, he played it so patient, and then right at the very end, he tried to pour it on. I'm like, I don't think so. I think he got it. You know, I think he had 1, 4, 5. You know, so, but it's one of those things where, like, I mean, honestly, I personally, just as the sport goes, I'd love to see decisions go this way. You know, Robbie was clearly the one trying to win more. You know, Johny felt, I think that Johny felt like he was ahead in the scorecard, so he was kind of content to kind of coast and play it safe. And I love to see guys that come forward like Robbie. Like, Robbie said it perfectly in the post-fight speech, was saying that, you know, like, this is how championship fights should be fought. You know, you should be coming out there trying to finish the guy. You shouldn't be sitting back, you know, trying to win a decision.
Yeah, absolutely not. And you should be going ape shit like that. You should absolutely be throwing caution to the wind, especially when you feel like the lead's slipping away from you. It was just great to hear him just grunt and get out of that terrible position, get back to his feet, and you could audibly hear Joe, and I don't know if this has ever come out of you during a fight. You seem pretty cool and collected, but I mean, that was just raw like just output from Robbie Lawler. That's the best term I can come up with. It's like button mashing in Street Fighter or something.
Dude, Robbie went straight up caveman on him. You know, he was not happy with him at the end. He's like mean mugging him at the end. You know, it was awesome. You know, and I love when fighters have that mentality. Like, okay, I'm gonna go at you. I'm gonna, you know, my job is in here, and I'm gonna beat you up. I'm not trying to win a decision. I'm not trying to play for points. I'm in here to beat you up. I'm here to hurt you. And you know, that's what he did. He came forward. He fought to the very end. I'm sure, like we had talked about last week, we had talked about the leg kicks and how those were going to be a factor for tonight. And, you know, I think that Johny did a great job kicking. You know, I think that Robbie was definitely doing a little bit better job defending them, but Johnny's offense was just so much more that, you know, he landed, I know that by like the fourth round they said he landed like 60 kicks or something, when in the last fight he only landed like 40 or so. So he was way more active with the kicks, you know, and it's one of those things where, like, doing a lot of damage with leg kicks gives you, it's not so much giving you like credit, but it's more setting you up for later on. It's like, oh well, you know, later on it's, you always say it's going to pay dividends. You know, it's going to, in a 5-round fight, it's really going to add up later on. But then Hendricks didn't really do anything with it. Like, he just kept putting all this money away, putting it away, and then, you know, you're waiting for, okay, now he's gonna spend it. Now he's gonna really use it. You know, he's been putting all this time into it, and then he just didn't. You know, now it's like, oh, now I'm going to push him in the fence and do nothing with it.
Yeah, it wasn't a means to an end. It was the end for Johny Hendricks in this fight. And I actually looked at it the other way, and I'm not sure. I mean, I certainly value your opinion, Joe, but I thought it was kind of indictable on Robbie Lawler after the leg kicks put such a cramp in his style in that first fight and took so many weapons away from him and proved to be something that really we hadn't seen Johny Hendricks use in the past, that was so effective in shutting down Lawler's game or giving him pause or taking away the power base he needs to deliver powerful punches, that he came out and just allowed himself to get kicked like that. That we talked about and speculated about why Robbie Lawler just doesn't seem to be very big on catching kicks or checking leg kicks and just seems to brush them off. But when those started to pile up in the middle of this fight, I was just like, man, you know, Lawler deserves this, because he should have been drilling ways to not get caught with just at the end of 1, 2, 3 combinations with kicks.
Yeah. Sometimes that comes down to, though, you know, like you think you'd put a little bit of, you put in a little bit of work and you think he's not going to go back to the well. You think it's not going to happen again. Like, oh, he was successful with this last time, but I don't think he'll do that as much this time. You know, maybe you can blame it off. You know, Johny obviously tried to wrestle a lot more this fight than he did in the previous one. So, you know, and that was kind of one of the things that I was thinking was going to happen. I thought that, you know, maybe last time maybe he wasn't shooting as many takedowns because his elbow was bothering him, or bicep, or whatever it was. So I thought that this fight, you know, maybe the kicks wouldn't come out as much. Maybe you'd see a lot more wrestling, and we did. You know, we did happen to see a lot of kicks, though, too.
Yeah, we did. We saw a lot of kicks, and we saw them at the end of combinations that were sneaky effective, but so that we don't miss anything in the spirit of what we've done, and of course we'll talk about Pettis and Melendez as well, let's kind of go through the fight and explore it. By the way, the closing scorecards, a pair of 48-47s, one for Lawler, one for Hendricks, and the winning scorecard for Robbie Lawler was actually 49-46, Joe. So while we talk about how we can see an argument for 3 rounds for Robbie Lawler, one of those judges saw an argument for 4 rounds, and I personally don't see that argument.
I don't remember which one, but I remember that 2 or 3 was like, it wasn't close. I definitely thought that Hendricks had it, but it wasn't like a blowout round. I think it was maybe the second round was, you know, so, and it always comes down to, you know, that's just one judge that gave him that 1 round. You know, maybe he saw something that we didn't see. You know, maybe he saw that, you know, maybe some of the leg kicks, you know, were adding up, or maybe Robbie did a little bit more, you know, at some point. I don't know exactly which round he was given, but you know, it's always tough, and that's why we have 3 judges. You know, it doesn't mean that one judge that gave the 49-46 was right. It just means that was his opinion for that, you know.
Absolutely. So the title was on the line, a rematch of UFC 171 back in March. And right before the fight started, when Hendricks was getting prepped in the prep point there, he insisted on putting some Vaseline on the inside of his nose and his nostrils. Why the hell would a fighter want to do that? Do you have any insight there?
I don't. Where was the fight?
Say that again. Oh, it was in Vegas. This is in Vegas. Yeah, Mandalay Bay. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. So Vegas is super dry. It's so dry there. Like, I remember when we were on the Ultimate Fighter, and we were out, you know, so everyone's out to Vegas, and we're out there for the first time. And like the first couple days, first like week or so, like every time you're just blowing your nose constantly. It's just bloody. It's just so dry there. So that's probably, you know, kind of what it is. I'm not sure where he's normally stationed, but it's probably not Vegas. It's probably somewhere else.
Yeah, it's Texas, and Oklahoma area.
Texas, okay, yeah. So, You know, it's so dry in Vegas, and some people it bothers a lot, some people not so much. Maybe it just bothered him a lot. He could have been, could have had a cold or something from before, and then you get out, so you get a little bit of a raw nose before, and then you go out to Vegas and it's worse. But I would guess it's probably just something along those lines. Like, people don't think of that stuff a lot of times when, it's not a big deal. It's just, he's got his nose is a little raw.
Yeah, I just never quite noticed a fighter being so particularly diligent about putting Vaseline there. I've seen fighters be obsessive about Vaseline, but putting it inside of your nose, that's a very good guess. It's better more than I came up with. But anyway, beyond that, round one and we're underway. And unlike in the first fight where Lawler in the first frame seemed to be trying to find his perfect opportunity and his perfect shot, hunting, being careful, being deliberate, trying to draw out Hendricks, he did not do that in this fight. He came out crazy, much like he did at the very tail end of the fight at the end of the fifth, going nuts, winging bombs. I think, Joe, and I don't know if you shared this sense, trying to just bust through the limitation of the way he fought in the first round of the first fight, just getting right in his face. What did you see and what did you think of how aggressive Lawler was right from Jump Street here?
I thought it was awesome. I thought it was great how he was so active right off the bat. I think that those knees to the body will really add up. I really liked how he was throwing to the body a lot. I liked how he was later in the fight. I liked how he was coming up to the middle. He came up with a front kick. He threw a couple knees. He threw a couple elbows, like a vertical elbow at one point. Because when you get someone like Hendricks that's really looking to close distance and come crashing in, you start putting things in his way. So you can't. If you try to wait to see him coming and then try to hit him on the way in, it's a little tough sometimes. But when you preemptively, you pre-fire a knee, you pre-fire an elbow, you throw it off a little bit before you think that he might come, then sometimes that's when you have those major knockout shots. I think one of the best examples is when Jose Aldo fought Mendes the first time, and he got rid of the wrist, he spun it through the knee right away. Yep. And Mendes was shooting, and and it was awesome. It was oh, he timed that so perfectly. No, he probably threw that knee 8,000 times, other times before, and they didn't land. But then, of course, the one time when it lands, everyone's all amazed by it. So I really, really liked, throwing the knees. I thought that was great because Hendricks is trying to keep his head up. He doesn't want to, he's not trying to shoot right away. All these knees just keep coming up. So you're staying up more. You're staying upright. You're hitting the body. I thought it was a really good strategy. I thought it was kind of on par with how in the last fight Hendricks was really kicking Robbie in the legs a lot, and it was something that Robbie really hadn't planned for. I don't think that Hendricks had prepared for Robbie throwing so many knees to the body.
No,
like that.
No, and not being able to take him down too. I mean, Robbie Lawler's takedown defense was there tonight, even though Hendricks did find success down the stretch, particularly in this first round. What did you see in Lawler? I mean, how is he stopping these takedowns that Hendricks seemed now with this, fully healed bicep he was going to be able to get?
Well, so everyone wants to talk about how great of a wrestler is Johny Hendricks is, but Robbie Lawler was part of Team Militich for such a long time. Iowa has some of the best wrestlers in the world, the country, and the world. But so he's constantly got all these guys that are trying to take him down, that are trying to do things with you. You always say iron sharpens iron, and so those things where you're in a room with all these guys that are these awesome wrestlers, you're going to get really, really good at certain things. And over a long period of time, you're going to get better and better and better, and all these good habits are going to rub off on you. And I think it's kind of a case of it's all about expending energy there. So you think normally that Johnny's going to be the more efficient guy, so he's going to hit the takedowns, and Robbie's going to have to fight harder to get up. So Johnny can kind of be patient and kind of almost hold Robbie down, but let him move just enough where he can struggle to get away. And Robbie will just keep burning his energy, trying to scramble, trying to get up. And but then in this fight, when Johnny's kind of staying there, not doing anything, Robbie's just kind of sitting there too. So he's not wasting that energy. Johnny's not doing anything with it. And the big thing would normally be that Robbie would be trying to get the hell up so fast, he'd be expending a lot of energy, but he didn't. He just kind of sat there. He's like, okay, we're just gonna I'm gonna have good habits, good tendencies, but I'm not gonna fight like crazy. He was pretty content to just kind of stall it out and be patient there. He did a really good job keeping his legs apart. The big thing, whenever you see someone gets pushed into the fence, you always see whoever's defending is they turn their feet sideways, so that their toes are both pointing one direction, and then they make their stance very, very wide. And part of that is because if you stand, completely like upright, like you would normally stand, right? Your knees are pretty close together. It'd be very, very easy for anyone to go up and wrap their hands under your butt and pick you straight up. But once you start widening your stance, now it gets tougher and tougher and tougher for your hands to reach. So now you're here and you're trying to constantly fight to get your hands together, and you're having trouble with it, So you turn your feet, you get your feet really, really wide, make it really difficult for someone to reach around both your legs and pick you up. Because once they get their hands together, you're screwed. But if you can keep their hands apart, you're in a much better spot. And Robbie did a great job
And did it strike you, Joe, that that's what Johny Hendricks was trying to do, link those hands? Because at several points in the fight, when he had Lawler pinned up against the fence, including in the first round, he would be down with one arm around one leg, the other arm around the other leg, and he would be sort of conscientious about keeping his head between Lawler's legs as opposed to off to the side of either leg. And I did want to ask you about that, the strategic mindset of making sure your head is between your opponent's leg. Is that Hendricks purposely keeping his head there on a lot of different points in the fight, or is that just what he has to do because Lawler's keeping such a wide defensive stance?
No, so that's definitely Hendricks trying to be smarter than Robbie. So if Hendricks comes out and he leaves his head off to the side, you're susceptible to tons of elbows. Like Travis Brown has finished a couple fights like that, where people push him on the fence and they heads off to the side, and he reaches across and starts landing a whole bunch of elbows. And there was a couple points where Robbie, like, he was kind of getting in position to do it, and it's a great tactic. It works really, really well, but it kind of, you can expose your back sometimes. People can come up and take your back when you bring that elbow across your center line. So Robbie, he started to kind of do it, and then he stopped and didn't want to do it. And then Mark Lehman, who's a great wrestling coach, great grappling coach, was in Hendricks' corner, and he kept telling him, keep your head in the middle, keep your head in the middle, because he doesn't want to see his, your guy's out there, he's this great wrestler, you push him someone in the fence, and he gets elbowed in the head, and he gets knocked out. That's no good. So Lehman was telling him, put your head in the middle, because then you can't get hit with those elbows.
Yeah, that was the mantra there, and Lawler did do a lot of work in those close quarters like that in the first frame, but Hendricks rallied a lot towards the end, ended up tying him up. Even though Lawler was defending well, he was able to get leg kicks off, hit a lot of left hand, some combinations, lift Robbie Lawler and dump him in the closing seconds. But it sounds like, Joe, you gave round one to Robbie Lawler, as did I. I think that early onslaught of punches landed enough significantly, and I think that the work he did inside the clinch negated it such that really Hendricks just had about less than a minute of winning offense in that fight, as opposed to neutral offense.
Yep, and I think he even finish. Did he take him down at the very end of the round? I was thinking like maybe like with 10 or 15 seconds
he
left.
He lifted him up and dumped him. Yep.
But he didn't really do anything with it. So again, I don't really give people tons of credit. Like if you hit a takedown, you have to do something with it. It's like if you jab someone a bunch and you don't do anything with the jab, you're kind of, it's offense, but it's not the same as landing a huge right hand and dropping someone and rocking them and. And I think that overall that first round, I thought round one, Robbie landed a whole bunch of knees to the body. I thought he definitely stunned Hendricks. Actually, I almost tweeted it. I started typing the tweet, and then I didn't look away. I didn't look back to my phone. I started watching the round, and then it was so long. I thought he stunned Hendricks in the opening, like that opening onslaught. Then towards the end of the round, like maybe 4 minutes in. They broke off the fence, and Robbie hit him. I don't know if it was a hook or a left hand. He hit him with something, and I thought it staggered, and like Hendricks started doing like that little that like little like someone's like jumping and kind of hopping when they really got stunned. I thought it was a really good fight. I really I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. The instruction between rounds was along the lines, from Lehman at least, run him into the jab, put low kicks behind it, dress up everything, he said. He said Lawler is going to come out and explode, to dress up everything. And dress up everything to you, Joe, means basically try to mask the leg kick, mask the combination punches. What might that mean to you?
Yeah, pretty much. You want to mask it a little bit. You don't want to let him know. Oh, here comes the leg kick. I'm going to kick you in the leg. It's working well. It's like, okay, you got to use some other stuff first. Throw a couple punches, come in with a kick. Throw a couple punches, come in with a kick. Throw a couple punches, come in with a takedown. If you just go out there, okay, here it comes, you're going to get countered really badly. I think that Lehman was trying to get Johny to remember about how quickly and aggressive Robbie came out in the beginning. For me, I kind of expected that because in the very first round, because Johny was asking Robbie if you want to touch gloves, and he kind of got like a puzzled look on his face. He's like, so he's okay, no touch gloves, okay, and then he was okay. And generally when that happens, that's because the other person really wants to rush right off the bat. A lot of times, like when you come out, you kind of come out kind of gingerly, you touch gloves, you circle for a second, you both get reset, and then you fight.
But if you don't want to touch gloves,
so
you're telling them, I don't want to be a bad guy, I'm coming right for your head, that's my strategy.
Yeah, because it sucks sometimes. Like when people go to the glove touch, and then they try and fight right off the bat, or maybe they touch gloves, but then they immediately set and they come back, and it just
Right.
looks bad. It's kind of bad sportsmanship. So like a lot of guys will be like, no, like I'm coming for you. We're not touching gloves. We'll be friends after the fight.
And if you're in Johny Hendricks' position, do you put that glove out just to maybe test the waters to see if that's likely what Lawler is to do? Because that might be a hint too, right? To put it out there, even though you don't care if you touch gloves or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're asking for trouble. If you ask the guy if you want to touch gloves, and they say no, and you go out there like you're gonna do it, like you're kind of asking for trouble. I think they're gonna come at you, hard. I felt really bad when Conor McGregor fought. I don't know if it was it wasn't Hendricks. Who was the Brazilian that Conor McGregor fought?
Yep.
That's who it was. And I thought that Conor was coming out to touch gloves, and I thought he sucker punched him. And I tweeted him like, "Oh, what an asshole!"
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And then I felt wicked bad because everyone started tweeting me like, "Oh no, Diego Brandao was like, no, he shook it off." So and Conor, I guess Conor always comes out like that. So I didn't realize. I felt like a jerk.
Yeah, there's a lot of gamesmanship there. I remember that you were in a little bit of a swirl there because people were looking for negativity on Conor big time. They were very much in the market for it. So there you were. So in round 2, Hendricks starts doing well with his hands, landing combinations, doing what Mark Lehman told him to do before letting those leg kicks off, which were very effective in this fight. I'm trying to get my head around Johny Hendricks' combinations, Joe, because they look very basic to me, just as a layman, but at the same time, they were very effective against an incredibly seasoned defensive fighter in Robbie Lawler, particularly in terms of striking. And I wondered if you can give me insight into what about Johny Hendricks' combinations seem to work.
I really think it's one of those cases where it's honestly it's his wrestling, because you feel like. Because his wrestling is always kind of like hanging over your head a little bit, where he has such a good wrestling. We knew Robbie wasn't going to take down Johny, or we were pretty certain that wasn't going to happen. So that was why, like Rogan was talking about how Hendricks was like completely upright, whereas Robbie had to kind of be down and ready to sprawl, and it's kind of tough. You're at a major disadvantage when you're having to worry about sprawling and defending takedowns and letting your hands go at the same time. Hendricks didn't give a shit. He was able to come barreling forward, and if Robbie had shot a takedown, he probably wouldn't have gotten the takedown, but he probably would have got in pretty deep on a takedown that if Johny had gotten in, he would have finished. So it's kind of one of those things where just because his wrestling is there and he kind of has that benefit, he can kind of do whatever he wants. It didn't really matter.
Absolutely. And round 2 closes with Hendricks landing a really hard kick to the body. Lawler then went to the head himself. That was kind of that moment where it was like Hendricks is attacking the body, Lawler is attacking the head with the kicks, and Lawler went for a head kick, slipped, landed on his ass. Hendricks pounces on him and actually locks up, or tries to lock up, a guillotine. Just seconds left, nothing really came of it. But that's kind of how the second frame closed. Lawler's corner tells him to go to the body with the front kick. And Lehman has this weird moment where it seems like time ran out on him faster than he expected. He almost seemed to have told Hendricks, you've got a lot of seconds left, and then suddenly he didn't, and they had to rush out of the cage after they washed the mouthpiece. Talk about that kind of sense of trying to keep time when you're a fighter. I mean, do you just rely on your corner to let you know how much time is left, or do you kind of know? And are you, and listen, while your coaches are barking instructions at you, are you mostly in your own head in between rounds like that? Because I always feel that way about fighters. They're getting all this instruction, but it looks like they're like, I'm just going to do what I want to do anyway.
Well, so it's kind of a weird thing. So I have my coaches. My coaches are in charge of training me. But at the end of the day, I'm the boss. Like, I'm going to do what I want. Like, they can try to tell me anything, and I can be like, yep, okay. And then I'm going to do what I want. So hopefully they've, educated me enough where, like, I understand that what they're saying is the correct way, and they kind of warp my mind.
Make it feel like your idea
to go. Yeah, trick me to maybe think, oh, this is a good idea. I'm going to do my idea, not their idea. This is my idea. This is what I wanted to do. When I was watching the end of the round, felt more confident for Robbie when Johny went for the guillotine, because I like to see that Johny went for the guillotine. Like I like when guys go for the guillotine or any submission really, but he didn't seem like it was something he does a lot. It was something like he just kind of just did it because it was the end of the round and kind of like almost like Hail Mary. It wasn't like Pettis, like he locked up his guillotine and he knew 100% like, oh, I have this. Like he wasn't taking a chance when he locked it up. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. He had a really good bite in the head. Johny just kind of grabbed the head and just kind of went for it. And it's not a bad thing to do at the end of the round, because if you don't get it, it's not the end of the world. Like I've gone for, when I fought Jamie Varner, I went for an awful arm lock off his back at the end of the round. It was like there was 10 seconds. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna go for this. I'm gonna give it a shot, and it didn't work out. He got on top of me for like 2 seconds and the round ended. And so I get that. I get why he went for it, but it was one of those things where I think that Hendricks is probably not doing. He's probably not doing tons of actual like grappling for jiu-jitsu. I'm sure he's doing tons of wrestling. I'm sure he's doing tons of ground and pound and stuff like that, taking people down, holding them against the fence. But he's probably not doing like a whole lot of like wrestling for jiu-jitsu without, it's probably really tough to disengage all his wrestling knowledge and focus on like, sitting in guard and working for sweeps and all that.
Especially
kind of
when
stuff.
you're working with Kenny Monday, as he was for this fight, who isn't necessarily the most jiu-jitsu oriented wrestler that you can train your grappling with.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear what he's trying to do working with Kenny Monday and going back to Oklahoma State, if you will. Round 3, leg kicks are still going for Johny Hendricks. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it kind of hits me at this point in the round that Lawler really hasn't made any substantial adjustments or accounting for the fact that those kicks may come again. We've already sort of broached that. Hendricks begins, per layman's instructions, crowding the head with punches, and when the hands go up by Lawler to defend, that's when the leg kicks start landing. And it's in this round, Joe, that Joe Rogan on commentary says it seems like Lawler's going to sleep in this round. And I kind of shared that feeling. I felt like suddenly Robbie Lawler seemed flustered. Suddenly he seemed heavy. It seemed like he had checked out of the fight. I mean, if you showed me the Robbie Lawler at the 4-minute mark, or with 4 minutes left to go in the third round, and then you showed me the Robbie Lawler in the last 20 seconds, I just wouldn't think it was the same fight or the same night, because, I don't know, did you share that sense that Lawler was checked out of the fight here in the third?
I think he was definitely not disappointed with how the fight was going, but he wasn't very happy. Like he was, kind of like depressed a little bit. The fight. So the first round, I thought he won, and he probably felt like he had a good first round. But then Hendricks started kind of coming on, even though Robbie did enough in the very beginning of the first to win the round. Hendricks started coming on, maybe 2/3 of the way through the round. Like Hendricks had like the last minute or so. So Hendricks had like the last minute. Then he had the second round probably. He probably had the now you're into the third round. It's like Robbie's thinking he's had this entire fight. He's kind of forgetting about like what's happened in the very beginning. It's really tough to kind of like run like that scoreboard in your brain and start thinking, this was all happened in the first, and this all happened in the second, and this all happened in the third. It's really, really tough to score like that. You think you're happy and you're having fun and you think that you're winning, or you're struggling a little bit and now you think you're losing. And I think that Robbie probably thought that it wasn't going so well. He probably thought he was losing a little bit. But I think his plan was to be patient. So it's not the end of the world. But now it's like fourth round. It's cornerstone. Okay, we got to kick it up a little bit. Like we have to. We can't just keep playing like this. We have to pick it up a little bit. And I think he did. And I think he did a great job. But I kind of felt like he was just kind of. He was kind of lackadaisical about it a little bit until his corner told him he had to kick it up.
I think he was kind of realizing that Hendricks was just going to wrestle him in this fight, and that he was, even though he could defend some of the takedowns, he was going to have a lot of trouble stopping this. That this is going to be a fight where he's on the ground, trying to work his way up, getting taken down, getting shot on, these low singles that Hendricks was hitting, and just these takedowns from all angles, that it didn't really seem like Lawler felt very comfortable. If the fight was going to be like that, that he was going to be able to win. And I think that sort of started to show in his body language in the third. But I think Hendricks started to get tired, or started to get too reliant on the takedowns as the fight unfolds. At one point in the third round, as we're talking about, Hendricks dove on a low single and got it, and gets Lawler to the mat, and you hear Lehman scream, "This is what we went to OSU for." So clearly, that is what they were doing in this fight, was wrestling. And I think as that realization came upon Robbie Lawler, it started to show in how he felt about his chances of winning the fight and landing the kind of blows he needed to. So he pins him up against the fence to close the third. We go into the fourth. Hendricks shoots late, shoots leaning up against the cage. They talk about how there had been 200 attempts by Johny Hendricks striking, and 100 in the first round, and 111 in the first fight. Rogan notes that Robbie Lawler isn't using the right, and there isn't much going on in this round. I mean, you see the crowd start to get restless. Do you feel like with Hendricks fighting the way he was fighting that there should have been some adjustment from him, if for no other reason than the crowd was dumping on the fight, or you can't afford to even think about that?
Well, it's kind of it's a weird spot because there's a really strange pacing of this fight, because you had like periods of all blitzes of both guys just winging punches, throwing like major strikes, like trying to kill each other, followed up by absolute periods of boredom of Johny pushing Robbie into the fence or taking him down and not doing anything with it. Lehman was calling out for him to pass the guard. He's like, oh, you can jump across the body, and he wasn't doing it. He's just kind of staying out there and not doing a whole lot. Yeah. So it's kind of it was kind of interesting pacing for this fight. Like it's one of those things where it's like if you look at the overall numbers, like, oh, this is a really fast action packed fight. But then when it actually happens, it's like you have like a crazy high pace for the first minute and a half of the round, and then you have 2.5 minutes of Johny pushing him in the fence and not doing a whole lot. So I think that part of it is that it's like the crowd is they're getting all super excited at the beginning of the round, and then it loses steam, and they're like,
well,
crap,
what's Johny doing?
Get back to being excited.
What is Johnny's end game in doing the stuff that it just people weren't very happy with, that earned him several restarts by the referee, for instance?
Well, so he's pushing him in the fence, and he's anticipating getting a takedown, and I'm sure that he expected to get more takedowns. But then when they just don't come to fruition, and like he's struggling. Now he's getting tired, and and he's able to keep pushing him in the fence, so he feels like he's kind of getting credit for it. And Robbie's not doing a ton. He's landing some good punches. He's coming forward. He's being a little more aggressive, but it's like it's kind of like the GSP. GSP used to take people down, hold them down, beat them up. But I think that GSP was a little bit more methodical about how he did it. Like he wouldn't just take someone down and do nothing with it. I think he would take people down and consistently land shots, and they wouldn't be big shots, but he was always like accumulating, like here's a point, here's a point, here's a point, here's a point. Whereas Hendricks is like he's getting in position to score that point, but then he's not pulling the trigger for the actual point.
Absolutely. In fact, such that he was sort of stuck in that single position in the closing seconds of round 4, and Lawler is now starting to get the idea that I'll just slug away at him. I'm not in a perfect position to land shots here in this entanglement on the ground, but he starts getting through on a couple of shots, and you realize that Hendricks isn't really going to move at all or shift, that he is going to just take these shots and stay stuck to the leg. That's his plan, and I think that's probably what emboldened Robbie Lawler so much in the 5th.
Yeah, there's Jimmy Quinlan has an awesome story when he's on The Ultimate Fighter, and so he's training with Chael Sonnen, and Chael is in on someone's leg, and he's like, what's going on here? He's like, do I have your leg? And the guy's like, yeah. He's like, you got me pushed up against the fence, not that different than what Johny was doing against Robbie Lawler. He's like, do I have your leg? He's like, yeah, you got both your arms, on my leg. He's like, no, you don't. Yeah, I don't have your leg. You have my arms. Your one leg is controlling both of my arms. And it's kind of a different kind of way to look at it, but he's 100% right. Because if both of Chael's hands are controlling, wrapped around my leg, it's like I'm controlling both of his arms. He's dedicating both of those arms to my leg. My leg might as well be holding on to his hands. Like his arms are staying there. So now I have the opportunity where I can hit them back. And I think that Robbie kind of had that realization like during the fight. He's like, what? Johnny's like, you don't want to take your hands, 100% to offense and start just hitting someone mindlessly, because now you're not defending the wrestling stuff. You need to use your hands to defend the wrestling stuff. But once you kind of stop their attack, now you got to get your hands busy. Now you have to start hitting them and start working them in. And in the beginning, it's kind of like a testing the waters kind of thing where, like, you hit them, and then you get ready to defend, and then you hit them 2 times, and then you defend, and then before you know it, you're just banging away and just throwing lots of hammer fists, and you don't really care because he's just sitting there, and he's, you're exposed a little bit because you're not defending as much, but you're not worried about it because he's not taking advantage.
And that's interesting. I think that's what we saw as Lawler realized that I can just let go, and Hendricks isn't really going to turn the corner into a more compromising position for me if I do let my hands go when he's down there stuck to my leg. And I think in the closing seconds of round 4 is what's probably going to differentiate people on who's winning this fight. I had Hendricks winning this round overall because I wasn't as sold on Lawler's flurries of offense in the closing, I'd say, minute or so, and that realization that came upon him as being enough to cancel out the 4 minutes of control and absolute nothing from Robbie Lawler earlier. But I think this is going to be the divergent point. Whenever we talk about close fights, controversial fights, it's always really comes down to 1 minute of one round on a disagreement. And with this, what I found interesting is that right after the round, they go to the corners, and Lawler's wrestling coach is telling him this fight is close, you got to win this. Actually, pardon me, Lehman is telling Hendricks, this fight is close, you've got to win this. And Joe Rogan pipes up and says, I don't know if he's doing that to be psychological with Hendricks and motivate him to win the 5th, as if to say, Lehman knows full well that Hendricks won the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. But it sounds like it wasn't crystal clear to everybody, unless Lawler gets the win and everybody rethinks their minds and pretends that they thought Lawler won the 4th when they really didn't on first viewing.
Yeah, so I always had the mentality that unless I'm 100% sure that I won that round, I want to assume that I lost the round. So if I go out there and I take a guy down and I'm beating him up and the entire round is me, okay, we can assume I had that round. But if there is any possibility that it's close, then we have to assume that that we lost that round. And that's like one of my big pet peeves when if I'm cornering people. Like, I hate seeing guys where it's like a close round and the corner's like, oh, you got that round, that was a good round. And it's one thing to be positive. It's another thing to just flat out lie to the guy or tell him, oh, you definitely have that round when they didn't. Because you go and tell the guy, oh, you definitely had the first, you definitely have the second. Let's go out there and just coast in the 3rd. And then they're like, oh, we got screwed. This decision was crap. It's like, no, you have terrible cornermen. You're a terrible cornerman if you go out there and tell your fighter, oh, you definitely had that round. You can tell them, oh, I think you had that round, but it was close. You could say, oh, I think you lost that round. We always tell our guys, whether it's me, Joe Proctor, any of my guys, like, if it's at all close, we assume we lost the round. And I think that Lehman's kind of like that too. And I think that Lehman is probably one of those guys he focused on the negatives.
Yep.
He's not super happy that Johny pushed him into the fence. He's unhappy that he's getting hit with a hammer fist. He's unhappy that he's eating these punches, and he's getting caught on the way in. And I think that's a great cornerman. And maybe it was the other way around. Maybe Lehman thought that he definitely had the round, but maybe he was doing something psychological. But I don't think so. I think that he saw
something was up, and that there was that potential hanging out there, which came home to roost at the end of the fight, that someone could have seen the 4th for Robbie, and it was 2-2, just like it was back on March 15th, except sort of in different order, with Hendricks taking the 1 and 2, and Lawler the 3rd and 4th back in March. This kind of spread out differently. So the 5th comes out, both are out swinging. Hendricks dives on the legs, crowd begins to boo. Herb Dean calls for a break. The stat that you mentioned, the 41 leg kicks landed by Hendricks in the first fight, is now at 61 in the second fight, is mentioned on the broadcast. Back to the legs against the fence. And I'm thinking, as Hendricks is digging and pinning himself to Robbie Lawler, we saw Joe, as he hauls off on him, that works. That's one thing you can do once you get closer to the mat. But is there anything that Lawler wasn't doing that he could have done to prevent being tied up so many times consecutively by Johny Hendricks?
No, I mean, I really don't think he did a better job at not getting tied up. I think he was less defensive with his hands and was more offensive. He started throwing a few more punches. He almost got out. He started grabbing it at Johnny's feet. There's like I said, it's always everything is a balancing act. Your stance is a balancing act. Like how offensive or defensive you are is a balancing act. If you go out there with no defense, with your hands down, with winging punches, you're gonna get knocked out. If you go out there and be super defensive and just keep your hands glued to your temples and don't do anything, you're gonna get appointed. It's kind of everything. Everything is a balancing act. And I think in the beginning, Robbie was really defensive because Johny was fresh. It was kind of even up to that point. You don't want Johny to get ahead. But now it's like you got to start thinking, okay, maybe I have to be a little more active. I have to take a chance a little bit. I have to be a little more offensive, and he did, and it paid off. It could have backfired horribly. He could have tried to be a little bit more offensive and then get taken down, and Johny could have been feeding him elbows and everything else. But he took a chance. He gambled a little bit.
Why do you think Hendricks was, if you had to hazard a guess, you're not in his head, but you're a fighter, you're a lot closer to it than I. Why would you think Hendricks would be content in that 5th round to just sit in position, pinned to one leg, taking shots, just being content to be there? Why would you think that would be in the 5th?
He probably thought he was winning the fight.
I think so.
You
could tell by the way he reacted after he got punched after the end of the. He was like, he was wearing this look on his face like, you didn't win the fight. You may punch me in the face, but you didn't win the fight.
Yeah, I think that it's, I don't want to say this to be a jerk.
Okay, well think it through, my friend.
I'm trying to think of, in general, yes. not saying this about Johny at all, but in general, a lot of wrestlers, they're kind of used to playing like that point game, and they get like. A lot of times you get like really good, like really elite wrestlers. They're a little bit arrogant about stuff. So they're so good at playing that game, and since they were like a little kid, they've been playing that point game about, okay, I beat you. Like I think that 100% in his mind, Johnny's like, I won this fight. He's like, I had all the takedowns. He didn't take me down. I pushed him in the fence. I did what I wanted. We were probably kind of even on the punches, and like I think that he was probably being maybe just like a little bit arrogant about it. And just thinking that he won, not too arrogant to be a jerk. I think he was very sure of himself that he won the fight. So he really wasn't that worried. And and then Robbie I don't think Robbie was super confident that he won the fight either. Because again, it's tough, especially like it's tough when you have a 3-round fight. Never mind a 5-round fight, trying to keep track of everything and trying to remember what happened in this round and what happened in that round and how things balance off and everything like that. I think that and I think that happens a lot of times. I think that guys they think that they won, and like they shake the guy's hand or whatever, but they're like a lot of times you get one guy that's like super confident. He's like, he's got his hands up and he's like yeah, I definitely won this one. I know in my heart that I won this one. And then the guy's like having my hands up, acting positive, right. Like yeah, I won this. It's like you're like, come on, put your hands down. Like you just got smashed like 5 rounds to 0. Like, you definitely did not win this fight. Like, put your hands down. Like, I understand what you're doing. Trying to play to the judges a little bit. But there's no way you won that fight. And, I think Johny was, the first. I think he was confident. I think he really thought in his heart that he won the fight. And...
How did Lawler come alive like that? How did suddenly it turn into a situation where he's just slugging Hendricks in the face with punches instead of being tied up? It just turned. All of a sudden, he was in his face, and I can't really understand how suddenly Hendricks relinquished the wrestling.
When you look like food, you're gonna get eaten. And at the end of that fight, Johny Hendricks was food. He was pretty much the entire 5th round. He was pushing Robbie into the fence and then wasn't even trying anything. He was like, okay, I'm going to push him in the fence, and he sat there. I don't think he had one single legitimate effort to try and take him down. That was why, how many? I don't know if they broke like 3 or 4 times, I think. In a single round, that's a lot. That's a big deal. You have to push someone to the fence and then do 0. You got to sit there for a little while, give them enough time to like, all right, you're not doing anything, and get it going, and then develop a pattern of it happening. It has to happen a bunch of times. I think that, as that happened, Johnny's just like, oh, he's exhausted. He has nothing left. Like, I feel really bad, but he feels worse. Adrenaline kicks in a little bit, and he's just like, all right, here, I'm going to give it everything I have. I'm sure Robbie's limping. I'm sure he's super sore. I'm sure he's exhausted. But he's got the belt. So
and how are you feeling finally on this fight? Then we'll get to the lightweight title fight. How are you feeling, having been as many fights as you've been, watching that output from Robbie Lawler at the end? Does that feel electrifying to you? Are you kind of cold about it? What do you like watching that kind of a display?
I get excited about it. Like I remember like I go back. This goes back to like my second amateur fight. Like I fought a guy, Andrew Kringa, and I lost the fight. I won my first fight as an amateur. I lost my second, so I lost this one. And I was so exhausted and so tired, and I thought I was like gonna die. I'm just like laying there, and like I didn't get beat up really. I mean, I got hit a couple times, but I was just so spent, and I felt like crap. And then I went and I puked, and I felt like $1 million. Like it was amazing. I puked. I got it all out. I felt awesome. And then whenever I see someone like that gets like that tired, all I'm thinking about is like that guy cannot wait to get in the bathroom and puke. and just feel 100 times better. You know, but it's awesome. It's awesome watching guys kind of rally back and come back like that.
And he pulled it off and sealed the deal. And at long last, Robbie Lawler is your welterweight champion. Man, it was a decade plus ago. 2002 was when he debuted in the UFC. That big things were predicted for Robbie Lawler, and the flashes of violence that made him a star in the early days were exactly what came out in that 5th round. You could see that look on his face again, you know, kind of like that face where he showed down with Nick Diaz before he got popped in the face, of course, and knocked out. But this kind of like, you know, he wears it on his face, and that means something when you see Robbie Lawler kick into that gear, because the Lawler that's risen to welterweight title contender since coming over from Strikeforce has been much more cold and calculated. This was the return of that mean mugging, you know, he's going to follow you all the way down the street until you say you don't want to fight him, Robbie Lawler.
Dude, I love watching Robbie fight. You know, he's one of those guys, like, you know, like you said, you just got like that fire in him. Like you said, he wears it all on his face, and he's one of those guys I really enjoy watching because he's got the right mentality about it. He's like, I want to go out there and I want to fight. I want to knock people out. He's like, I don't care if you hit me. I'm gonna keep coming. And you know, like I was thinking about, I think we talked about last week, was it the Melvin Manhoef when he got fought and he just getting his leg kicked out and he just kept on, like he didn't care, he just kept coming back. It's just like he's one of those guys. He's in there to fight. You know, he's not trying to win. He's trying to finish.
Now
fights.
over to your division. The UFC Lightweight Championship is also on the line tonight in Las Vegas as Anthony Pettis retains over Gilbert Melendez, the first man to ever finish El Nino. This time it's a 2nd-round guillotine choke for Anthony Pettis, and he retains the championship in his first fight since August of last year. And what a showing. Overall impressions, Joe. I mean, this Anthony Pettis, you know a bit about being in there with him. You know a bit about what he can do. I think we may be looking at one of the better lightweights, if not the best lightweight ever right now, because he is developing a game that he can just impose on anybody, regardless of how good they are, and he continues to get better. He already has a resume on par, I think, with most lightweights ever. What are you making of this kid? I mean, this is amazing what he did to Gilbert Melendez tonight.
Super impressive. You know, I think he just did an awesome job. I think Gilbert had the perfect game plan to try and, you know, beat him, and he shut it down. Like, he did a great job. Made me feel a lot better about getting kicked in the face in Japan by him. You know, it's like, obviously, like, anytime I lose to someone, I want to see them win going forward, you know, because I want to lose to the guy that, you know, got to be the title and they're talking, you know, is like, you know, the best lightweight ever and all sort of stuff. Like, that's the guy you want to lose to. You don't want to lose it anyways, but if you're going to lose, that's the guy you want to lose to. But I'm impressed. You know, I was really impressed. I think that Gilbert had a really good game plan. Coming into the fight, I thought that Pettis was going to win. You know, I thought it was gonna. I was my reasoning, you know, in MMA math, which never works anyways. But Benson Henderson went to decision with Gilbert. It was a pretty competitive fight. You know, no one was really blowing anyone out of the water, but it was, you know, really close fight. And then Pettis just, you know, did a great job. You know, finished him, like, made it look easy. You know, and to go out there and be so dominant against someone like Benson is a big deal. So I thought that I'm like, you know, I don't know if Gilbert is gonna come and bring that much more against Pettis that Benson couldn't. And you know, but then I was getting nervous. Like, that first round, I was getting nervous a little. Not nervous, but I was getting nervous for my prediction a little bit because, you know, Gilbert was doing a good job. Like, he was pushing him. But the big thing that I noticed was that I felt like Pettis was clipping Gilbert, like, pretty consistently.
You could see it coming, right? You could see Pettis. You could see the flashes in there where it's like, all right, once he starts to land that in volume, he just needs to find the right arrangement of circumstances, and he can turn the corner in this fight. It's not like he was helpless. It was just that Melendez was able to wade through those flashes where you could tell that Pettis had something for him. Whether he would find it or not would be a question, but it wasn't like Melendez had no resistance to fight through in that first round, even though he won it.
Yeah, you know, and the other thing, too, is that, like, Joe Rogan was talking about how Melendez, like, that's kind of the fight he likes, that kind of long, grindy kind of fight and wear people down. And I don't think Pettis is the biggest lightweight. Gilbert is a pretty good size lightweight, so Gilbert's a little bit bigger. And the fact that he was, like, hanging on him for so much of the first round, making it like this kind of wrestling match kind of deal, and kind of like trying to wear him out and drag him down. And the fact that Pettis was still really, really fast, and Pettis was a little bit faster in the very beginning, I felt. But then as, after Gilbert kind of had his time to kind of wear him down a little bit, Pettis was even faster. The difference was even bigger. It grew. So it's kind of like, I'm sure Gilbert's looking for the opposite. You're looking to, grab onto him and wear him down and kind of take away some of his speed and kind of, make yourself more at his level. But instead, I felt like Gilbert used more energy than Pettis did, and he slowed down worse. And Pettis continued on, and Pettis just hit him with these little chip shots, like hit him and defend, hit him and defend, hit him, defend. Big variety of things. He came with a whole bunch of kicks and punches and uppercuts. Like hit him with all kinds of different angles and different shots. So, and then cinched up the guillotine. And like I said before, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Like that's his move. He knows exactly what he's going for. Which you didn't see. You didn't see that confidence.
Well, let's
when Johny Hendricks
right. No, not at all. Well, let's give Gil his due though. He did take one round off the champ. So let's look at what he did well before we get to how Anthony Pettis just showed off once again. Showed up.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
On Melendez,
absolutely.
What's he doing against the fence? He's obviously using one or two punches, kind of taking a risk, 2 or 3 punches, engaging with Pettis to get him pinned up, and then body locking him or diving low, crouching down. You always picture Melendez kind of sitting down and just going like this anyway, not blindly, but that's just the way he uses the punches, and it works for him in getting to his wrestling. He had kind of an interesting position, Joe. They're both pushed up against the fence, and Melendez almost has like one hook in, but he's sort of off to the side, facing right on Pettis' hip. And he got a lot of interesting work in from kind of just having that one leg grapevine, but standing, not on the floor. It's almost like just having one hook in with a guy's back, except both are standing. Talk a little bit about the way Melendez uses position against the cage and why it gave Pettis trouble.
He put in like a hook and he triangled on it, which makes it's really tough to get away. And the big thing is that Pettis just can't get distance. He can't get he wants to turn his hips, he wants to get out of there, he wants to get an underhook, but you can't face him, you can't do a whole lot. And Gilbert is completely content to just sit there and grind. He did a great job. Like I said, he made me really nervous in the first round because I started thinking that I was anyone that asked me, I was telling him I thought Pettis was going to win, and then Gilbert was kind of taking it to him like, oh shit, like I told him, I didn't think it was it wasn't looking really good for Pettis in the beginning of the round, and it's just Gilbert's just wearing him down, or looks like he's wearing him down. He's doing everything right. He's got him up against the fence. He's locking him in on the leg. He's playing all the hand fighting games of like getting to the far arm and catching the inside and catching the outside and trapping things and pinning things. He's landing good punches. Pettis did a great job at keeping his hand on the ground,
right,
so that Gilbert couldn't knee him in the head. And so, but then Pettis still kind of got his arm kind of up here. So then Pettis starts he's throwing knees kind of in the direction of his head, but he's hitting him in the arms. And if Pettis had moved his arms, then Gilbert would have been hitting him in the face, and then he would be in trouble, But he's kind of got one hand down, and he's kind of blocking, and Gilbert's attacking like his forearms and his shoulders and his body and his legs. Just hit him with all these little tiny shots, and kind of made it like a grinder kind of game plan, And Rogan was talking this is the kind of fight that Gilbert wants. And that's what he wants. You get someone that's got a speed advantage. You want to slow him down. You want to grind him.
And in envisioning the fight, Joe, and picking it for Pettis, you must have thought that Melendez would try to do this type of a game plan, but maybe in your head, and the reason you got pause and nervousness perhaps, was that you thought Pettis might be more able to extract himself than he was in the first round?
Well, the big part of that made me nervous was the fact that Gilbert kind of pushed him up against the fence, and because he put in that little half body triangle thing on the leg, he just looked so content and happy to stay there. I was watching him, I don't know what I would do in this position, but I'll guarantee you it was something that Gilbert was working on a lot, and that
very deliberate. He was very deliberate with it.
Yeah. Benson pushed him up against the fence. And it's kind of like a common position you see all the time. But Gilbert kind of had him kind of like a position you maybe would say is low percentage and maybe not the best place to be. But I bet Gilbert did it a ton. I bet he was a master of that position. He knows every way to move in there, knows how to hang out there, knows how to wear people down. And, so I started, like I said, I started getting a little nervous. I started thinking, oh, this might not go so well for Pettis. But then when they broke apart, and Pettis looked just as fresh as he did when they rang the bell in the beginning. At that point, I kind of I was super confident that in my pick, and I thought that Pettis was gonna.
And he certainly did. In between rounds, Ben Askren tells Pettis, "Let's take the exits better." Duke Rufus gets at his face and says, "Get offensive. Don't load up." Joe, what does "don't load up" mean?
So don't load up is like, you want to be quick. You want to be quick with your punches. Like if I'm quick, I'm just throwing my punches really, really quick. You don't really see it coming. I'm not telegraphing it. When I load up, I'm like, all right, here it comes.
Why would you ever do that? Do you find yourself doing that, just not realizing it?
So a lot of times you're loading up, it's going to be a stronger strike.
Right.
Like you're gonna, it's more of like a really power strike. It's like in all the like old school video games. You hold down the B button and your guy kind of comes here and he's there. Or if you just tap it really quick, he just kind of flicks it out. Same kind of idea. You don't want to load up, but it happens all the time, especially as guys start to get tired. They stop worrying about speed. They start thinking more about power. And they're really trying to kill people because like they're getting tired. Like, oh shit, I want to get this fight over with. I'm just go out there. I'm gonna hit him really hard, and then I'm gonna win the fight.
Did you see Pettis loading up a lot in the first? Because I was surprised to hear Duke Roufus say that, because I didn't feel like he really was loading up. But maybe I should go back and watch him more closely. But that wasn't one of the problems I sensed Pettis had in the first round.
It wasn't something that I saw him doing either, but it could have just been a case of, it's a known thing that maybe he does it sometimes. Maybe he gets, as he gets a little tired, or just, it's just one of those normal things. Like I know that, like my corner always tells me, like, they remind me to breathe. It's like, 30 seconds in, 45 seconds in, if you go back and watch my fights, you hear my corner screaming at me, breathe, 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 because sometimes I hold my breath. And they might be yelling it, and I might not be holding my breath, but they just, regardless, that's one of those things that they're going to yell. It's one of those things, those are the big things, whenever we tell our guys, like pretty much across the board, breathe, don't lose position. Those are like the big two that we tell people all the time. Every fight, doesn't matter. You can be doing a great job of taking people down, holding them down, not letting them get anywhere, weigh 10,000 pounds, pinning someone down, you're still being told don't lose position.
And in the second round is when Pettis begins to style a bit. Those punches that got through in a flash in the first round as Gilbert was closing the distance began landing a bit more solidly, with Pettis having more freedom of movement and motion after landing them. Overhand right, Gilbert dropped down right away after soaking that in, but Pettis got free. And then he puts the flick kick out right to the face of Melendez, and that's always demoralizing, Joe, to get that ball of the foot right in the face. And it's an effective technique. We've seen, of course, Anderson Silva put someone away with it in Vitor Belfort, but that flick kick, to me, whenever I see that landed in a fight, it always tells me that guy's going to win, because that's just such a dominant, that just shows you've got something on the guy when you can go right up the middle like that and smack him in the face with your foot.
Yeah, it's definitely a confidence thing. Like if you're confident, you're throwing that. If you're not confident and getting it up and snapping it out and being so fast and so accurate and so powerful with it, like you wouldn't throw it. You have to have a lot of confidence if you're throwing that. But it's one of those things where like Pettis realized that that gap was growing. Gilbert, he took the best that Gilbert had. Gilbert went out there, put a lot of pressure on him, pushed him in the fence, really tried to wear him down. Gilbert ended up expending more energy than Pettis did, and Pettis is just moving faster, didn't slow down. So that's kind of like the confidence. It's kind of like he's having more fun. He's having fun out there.
Certainly he is, and he started showing the Showtime, trademark movements and carrying himself that way. And the finish comes in an absolute flash, because as these punches and kicks are beginning to land on Melendez, and he's having more and more trouble tying him up, there's the sudden moment where Melendez is kind of down there fishing for legs, and Pettis just goes all in on a guillotine in a flash. It happens very quickly. I wondered what you saw as far as what Pettis may have seen that told him now's the time to go for the guillotine, because it came out of nowhere to me. I was just like, wow. Because the idea of the fight was Pettis fighting off Melendez going for the legs, creating distance, and hitting him from there, not suddenly making him pay for shooting low with a guillotine. It just didn't seem like that was in his playbook, and there it is.
Well, he hit him good. Yeah. I think it was a right hand. Hit him good with a right hand, and then that prompted like the general thing with a lot of anyone really, but wrestlers in particular, is when they get hit, they go into kind of like desperation mode, where like they change levels and they just shoot. It's like maybe they're partially concussed, maybe they're not all the way there, they're stunned, whatever they are, but they don't get stunned and they don't back away. They get stunned and they shoot and they come forward. And I think that Pettis just understood that he stunned him really good. He landed a really good right hand, and and Gilbert came in, his head was kind of hanging out there, and he gambled on it, took a chance. I really felt like as the fight was stopped, as Gilbert tapped, I felt like he was out of it. I think if he had, maybe if he could have lasted like maybe half a second or a second longer, I think he would have been out of it, because Pettis was in mount, but he wasn't low. Like usually if you're in the guillotine, you're looking to have your hips lower and kind of grapevine, and you're generally trying to be there. He wasn't. He was like really, really high. He was kind of off at an angle. There's a lot of space between Pettis' chest and Gilbert's chest. If he had lasted a tiny little bit longer, then he might have gotten out. But again, he's stunned. That's why Pettis went for it at that time. Like, he stunned him. He's not thinking very clearly. He's in desperation mode. He shoots, and next thing he knows, he's going to choke, and he's trying to get out of there, and he just can't. So, but I think if he had lasted a little bit longer, he would have been out. Because when he rolled and Pettis was on top, I thought he was out. I'm like, oh, he's out, because it looked really, really good. And I was like, I was sitting down, and then I'm standing up, like, oh, and then I sat down because I thought he was getting out, and then
it's over. What did Pettis do right? Talk about the form, just the strict execution of that guillotine.
So the right timing, he stunned him first, and then when he came in, he wrapped up the head. He got just the head. A lot of times guys will get the head in, they'll get the arm, which is not nearly as good. He jumped guard, and when he jumped guard, he didn't jump guard and let his back be flat on the ground. He jumped guard and really sunk down that side, because as you're getting choked, you want to get your arm in there, and then you want their head, all of your weight to be on their head. So when you really get on your side, you put a lot more weight on their head, makes it a lot tougher to get away. If you kind of just jump and go to guard, now you still have to rely on your arms to bend the head and do anything. But Pettis did a really good job about using his weight to kind of bend the head and to cinch it up. He locked around both hips, which was great. He had his knees really, really wide so he could lift his hips up, which was awesome. And when Gilbert started to roll out, he followed him as best he could. Sometimes it's really, really tough to stay completely tight, which was why I thought that he kind of got out a little bit. I think if Gilbert had lasted longer, he might have got out, but it was enough, because he tapped. So and Pettis might have come out with mount. If Gilbert didn't tap, he might have come out with mount. He might have just readjusted and cinched it back up again. He might have jumped off. He a million things could have happened. He did everything right, really. I mean, I don't think he did make us.
Certainly not. The guillotine, Joe, seems to be making a little bit of a comeback right now. I always hesitate to draw these trend lines, but I don't know. A lot of guys are using it as sort of the kill shot after strikes. I think back to our very first show where Luke Rockhold does it to Mike Bisping, just to seal the deal. It was not a submission fight up until the second that it was, and then it's over. And the guillotine, to me, kind of as MMA evolved and as the years went on, and as it became less and less a move that it seemed to become a move that was low percentage, that ran a higher risk of you burning out your arms and going all in on something that wasn't going to work. Fighters seemed to be very, very good about defending it and understanding the body mechanics of it and not getting caught in it. But now it seems like guys have figured out how to do it very quickly and perfectly, and do it at the right time when a guy is stunned. Do you get that feeling that the guillotine sort of there was a lull in its use in mixed martial arts, and now that it's really back in force?
Yeah. The big thing is that people were kind of idiots when they were doing guillotines before. A lot of people might think that like a guillotine is like kind of a power move, and it can be. Like if you don't do everything like as efficient as possible, it definitely relies on just it's like if brute force isn't working, you're just not using it enough. And it's one of those things where if you just grab someone's neck and you squeeze hard enough, they're gonna tap. But guys have gotten good at kind of defending, so now you have to have really good technique. So now guys are getting really good at doing it like how Pettis did. He gets way off on his side and gets on his hip. Even Johny Hendricks, who went for it tonight, he was still on his side, and he was still locking it up, doing a really good job. Uriah Faber's awesome at locking it up. Like he's great at it.
Yep.
Like one of the best at it. But locking up guillotines, he's so strong. Really, Uriah is like one of those guys got all that crazy upper body strength, really good at locking things up. But he's technical whiz too. Like he's very, very technical. So, so he's had a success for a really long time. But him being so strong helps. But it's really because he's so technical about it. But I think that everyone's kind of catching up to it now. They're kind of wisening up to the guillotine a little bit, and they're understanding that if they do it technically correct, it's really, really tough to get away. Whereas before they would just kind of wrap around the head and just jump with it, and guys would get
Pettis becomes the first to finish Melendez and retains his championship. Joe Lauzon, put your finger on what makes Anthony Pettis so effective. What is it?
I think confidence is an all-time high. I mean, he's just super confident. You can see it. Like he kind of kind of pisses me off a little bit sometimes because, like I remember so I fought him in Japan. I saw him after the fight, and I just tried to tell him like congratulations. He's like kind of yep, okay, cool, thanks, bye. And it was just kind of like they didn't brush past me, but like it was like he had bigger things to do, at the time. And I was like, he might have been great at some time that I don't remember because I have like a gap of like 10 minutes where I have no idea. Maybe I yacked his ear out for 10 minutes and he just wanted to get past me, but. Then, like Gilbert tried to come up to him right after the fight, and he kind of like walked right by and like didn't do anything. And he ended up circling back to him after, but he's kind of like, I'm the man, I'm the champ, you know what I mean? And like that arrogance is like it's good because it helps for confidence, but it kind of rubs people the wrong way sometimes. But I think he does. I think it really helps him. I think that's like a big asset. I think it really helps. And like I said about wrestlers too, like wrestlers get a little bit arrogant, like really elite, like really good wrestlers kind of get like that a little bit. And you kind of have to have that mentality a little bit. It's not really a bad thing. It's I think it's kind of a good thing. It pushes you to get to that next level.
You can see why fighters and wrestlers stay that way, even though they might get negative social feedback, because to them it's essential to why they're in that position and on the top of the mountain in the first place. Is because they carry themselves like that. It puts themselves in a position to have to do it, to have to live up to it.
Yep, in Pettis, everyone knows who Pettis is because he's the champ, because he's been so impressive. He could be the nicest guy ever, but if he's not winning fights, if he's not the champ, none as many people care. So, so maybe you rub a couple people the wrong way, being like that a little bit. But he's, I'm sure he's, that's just like kind of fight night stuff, which is fine. Like I think that's good. I think that's like, it's kind of, maybe it's not the best socially, but it's like good gamesmanship, I think. So I think confidence is a big asset. I think he's just super athletic. I think he works incredibly hard. I think that I've seen tons of people that are super talented and super athletic, but they don't work very hard and they don't do very well. I think he's got both. I think that, he's one of those guys that was talented and could do a lot of stuff. Like, probably was one of those guys where you show him something and you tell him something between rounds and he's doing it during the fight, and he does a great job at it. But but he's working really hard at it after the fact too. So I think that, I think that's the big thing. He's just athletic, confident, and I think he works really hard. And he's got great coaches. Yeah. He's got really good coaches, good training partners. I think that, having a brother that trains is a huge asset. I know it's helped me a ton. Having my brother Dan, just because you just get really competitive with him and you always get someone to bounce ideas off of and try things with and train with, and you're kind of trying to, I'm sure as a big brother, he's trying to set a good example for his brother. So I think that kind of, even if he was hardworking, that's probably makes him a little bit, work a little bit harder on top. So I think it's kind of a perfect storm of just, just does things right, I think that probably, the reason he's gotten hurt so much is probably because he does train so hard. I don't think he's getting hurt because he's not training. I think he's getting hurt because he's training his ass off all the time, and he's getting banged up.
Absolutely. I don't know if you think in these terms, Joe, but I might as well put you on the spot. That's always good for a show like this. Where does he rank in the greatest lightweights ever? I'm gonna say it's him and Frankie right now, and they're circling each other. And if Pettis makes one or two more title defenses, that's it. I know BJ had his signature run at 155. I think of BJ as sort of a man of all seasons who's legendary for fighting anybody, and his welterweight exploits as much as his lightweight exploits. His lightweight reign was something to be seen and to behold and something to be reckoned with, but I think all told, you got to say Frankie was better in that division. And I think of the balance of achievements. I think of the scalps that Pettis has already collected. 2 wins over Ben Henderson, one in a flash, first to finish Gil Melendez, who's one of the best lightweights we've ever seen in the sport. I guess Gomi is out there in the soup somewhere when you think about great lightweights, but I mean, aren't we looking at someone who very easily could be considered the best lightweight or close to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So the 2 names aside from Pettis that I think of is BJ and Frankie. But I think you're right. I think BJ was kind of inconsistent at 55 just because he was bouncing all over the place and constantly trying to challenge himself. I think that if BJ had decided to stay at 155, he might have steamrolled absolutely everyone, but he didn't. So you can't really. It's too murky to start saying, oh, what ifs. But as far as like what they actually did, Frankie was dominant. But I think part of the thing that's really impressive about Frankie is that he was undersized for the division, and he. A lot of his fights, like he would take like tremendous abuse and would keep coming back and would come back and win fights. So I think that's impressive in its own right. But you know, Pettis has just been destroying people
and not taking damage. You know, unlike Frankie, just not taking anything. I mean, just running game. He's Silva-esque in that way. He's kind of, you know, casting spells on opponents. It seems like fantastic fighters.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, like you know, if you take out the one blemish of Guida, I mean, he's crushed everyone. Like he not that I'm like one of the best lightweights, but he kicked me in the face and just did it like flawlessly. He beat Benson and made it look pretty easy. He beat Gilbert tonight and made it look pretty easy. Like didn't like, you know, it wasn't easy, but he wasn't struggling. I mean, he took him out the, you know,
Cerrone right to
round.
The body in a second.
Yep, took out Cerrone, who's great. I mean, he's like you said, he's collected a lot of scalps. He's done a really good job. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, you know, you got to put him right there. Probably the best. I think probably the best. You know, Frankie's a, you know, you probably say, you know, you can argue for Frankie, but Frankie's impressive just because of all the other stuff, just dealing with adversity and just, you know, kind of coming back and pushing back through and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at, you know, Frankie, like almost all of Frankie's fights, like he really struggled, whereas, you know, Pettis just
let's book it
easy.
Just quickly before we wrap up here. Pettis versus Edgar, 155. Who wins?
Pettis. I think Pettis, just because he's too diverse. Like Frankie's very, very good. He's got great hands. He's good at catching kicks. His takedowns are awesome. You know, I mean, but I think Pettis is just because he's so. Frankie has like a really big speed advantage most of the time, but I think that Pettis would be pretty close. And I think that he's so crazy with all the kicks, and you know, it would be tough for Frankie to just kind of barrel in with takedowns without eating a knee or a kick.
And
or
another
something.
fight that came very close to happening: Pettis versus Aldo. Let's say Aldo conquests someone else at 145 and finally makes that jump. Pettis has wanted that fight. It's been on the books a few times and then fallen out due to injuries. Who do you like there?
I like Pettis in that one too. You know, I really do. I think Aldo has looked like earlier on. I think he was like superstar, like super impressive every time out. His last couple fights, I think he's been not as impressive with the finishes. You know, he's got a couple finishes, but he's got a lot of fights that kind of went to decisions. And I think that Pettis just looks like he's done such an easy job. He's taking like the best of the best. I think that Benson would do good against Aldo. I think that Gilbert would do good against Aldo. I think all these other guys that have done. I think Cowboy would do good against Aldo. So if all these guys would do good against Aldo, and Pettis made them all, you know, took them all down pretty easily, you know, like you have to think that he would do the
Fascinating
same.
stuff to think about as Anthony Pettis takes out Gilbert Melendez here tonight at UFC 181, and Robbie Lawler defeats Johny Hendricks in the rematch by split decision to, at long last, become the welterweight champion. And thanks to Joe Lauzon allowing us to pick his brain at great length here on the Lowdown, episode number 5. We've got a good idea of how both of those title holders got the job done tonight. Joe, it's a pleasure as always. Any parting words for the watchers?
We'll catch you guys next week.
Plan. Thank you for joining us on the Lowdown.